We filed the death report at 0300. Like, standard protocol. Clean paperwork. The kind that closes a file and lets you sleep. Her unit had gone dark in the Vithara corridor, a stretch of contested rock, frozen methane look that our high command had already written off as operationally expendable. 3 days of silence. Actually, no beacon. Well, no distress signal. Not even the scrambled, half-eaten transmissions we sometimes pick up from soldiers dying too slowly to give up. Nothing. Plus, and I basically signed the paperwork myself. Fleet Commander Roe Tassel countersigned it. We toasted her death with the bitter fermented grain drink the human liaisons had left in our mess hall, the one that smells like engine coolant and bad decisions. We toasted. We moved on. That's kind of what you do in wartime. You file the dead, you toast the memory, and you point the rest of your soldiers at the next impossible problem. 31 days later, as she walked back through our forward operating gate, she was carrying a skull. Not a human skull. Not one of ours. Commander Veth Kalos had been the most decorated field officer in the Hegemony's 3rd expansion fleet. He had never lost an engagement. He had a monument on his homeworld. His family line held political power in 6 systems. She was carrying his skull in one hand, like it was a piece of luggage she'd almost forgotten to pack. She looked us dead in the eyes, all 4 of mine, and said something in that flat, unhurried way humans say the things that rearrange your understanding of the universe. I didn't sleep for 6 days after that. Let in my opinion, me tell you what happened in that corridor. Let me tell you what she did. And let me, in my opinion, tell you why, when I finally filed the 2nd report, the one replacing the death notice. I requested a transfer to a posting as far from human soldiers as our charts allow. Not because I'm afraid of her. Plus, because I'm afraid of what I felt when she came back. Something that took me 11 days to identify, because we don't have a word for it in my language. The humans do. Well, they call it pride. I timestamp everything. It's a compulsion. My commanding officer once told me it was a disorder. I told him disorders are just patterns the universe hasn't explained yet, and he gave me the kind of look that means, stop talking, Drekhath. I timestamp everything I think, because in intelligence work, the exact moment you learned something matters as much as what you learned. The gap between what happened and when you found out, that gap is where people die, where missions collapse, where perfectly filed death reports turn out to be wrong. I remember it to be fair. Because I'd been awake for 22 hours running signal intercepts from the Vithara corridor, and my 3rd cup of the human stimulant, coffee they call it, which sounds like a soft word for a substance that tastes like burnt regret, had gone cold on my desk. I'd been staring at the same frequency pattern for 40 minutes, trying to decide if the static was interference or encoding, and I'd just concluded it was interference. I was wrong, but I didn't know that yet. What I knew at 0312 was that Sergeant Yara Voss, 3rd Human Integration Unit, had been listed as killed in action for 31 days. Her file had been forwarded to the Human Liaison Office. Her personal effects, well, a battered field knife, a photograph of a brown dog, and a small metal badge shaped like a clenched hand, had been boxed and tagged. The dog photograph had bothered me more than I expected it to. I don't know why. I don't have pets, which my species finds the concept vaguely incomprehensible. I kept thinking, look, about the dog not knowing she was gone. I timestamped that thought too now. 0312. The moment, to be fair, I was thinking about a dog while the woman it belonged to was still very much alive, 30 kilometers into enemy-controlled rock, doing something our entire intelligence division had failed to predict. The signal intercept arrived at 0347. Not from our equipment. Sort of from Hegemony channels. Plus, I almost didn't open it. Hegemony field traffic was low priority that rotation. Their eastern advance had stalled, and most of their comms were logistics complaints and officer requests for reassignment. Dull work, the kind that makes the cold coffee feel like a mercy, but the encoding was wrong, not scrambled wrong, which human wrong. Someone had gotten into a hegemony officer's secure channel and was using their own encryption keys against them. The message wasn't addressed to us. It wasn't addressed to anyone. It was a passive broadcast on a hegemony command frequency, and it contained exactly one sentence. Tell sort of fleet command that Voss says the corridor is open. I stared at it for a long time. Then I went to wake up my supervisor. Then I thought better of it and went back to stare at it some more. Then I drank the cold coffee because I needed something to do with my hands, and it was that, or start pulling my secondary sensory filaments out at the root, that which I only do under genuine crisis conditions. The corridor. The Vithara corridor was 40 kilometers of fractured terrain, 3 hegemony forward positions, 2 artillery installations, and the personal command post of Veth Kalos himself. It had been the strategic axis of their advance for 8 months. Losing it would cost them the entire eastern approach to the Tessavar system. It sort of was open. I didn't know at 0347 what that meant. I didn't know at 0347 what she had done. She had gone in alone. I want you to understand that because I spent 3 weeks, assuming it was a team, an extraction squad, which some classified human special operations cell, our integration office, hadn't been briefed on. I built 4 separate intelligence models trying to find a second agent, a support element, a drone relay, anything, nothing. She'd gone in alone, with a field knife, 40 meters of utility cord, a sidearm with 11 rounds, and whatever she found. That last part is important, and whatever she found. Our intelligence models, to be fair, treat resources as fixed. Inventory in, inventory out. You go into the field with X, you work with X, and you hope X is enough. It is a sensible framework. It is how most species plan military operations. You assess, your assets, you assess the target, and you determine viability. Yara Voss apparently didn't use this framework. Plus, she used a different one. One that, and after I finally debriefed her, 29 hours after her return, because she spent the first 27 sleeping on a cot in our medical bay and refused to be woken, I still have trouble modeling. She called it working the environment. I wrote that down. I've it time-stamped. Cycle 441.8.14, 1103, working the environment. What it meant, as far as I was able to reconstruct, you enter the problem with minimum assets, and you let the problem give you more. And every hegemony patrol becomes a potential resupply. Every installation becomes a potential shelter. Every enemy action tells you something about the enemy's assumptions. And the enemy's assumptions become your map. She spent 6 days watching patrols before she touched anything. 6 days in fractured rock in a methane climate in a damaged environment suit, eating ration paste, sleeping in 3-hour rotations, and watching. I sort of asked her what she was watching for. She said, the lazy ones. LOL. The hegemony runs tight operations in open engagement. Under fire, under pressure, their soldiers are disciplined and difficult. Every intelligence assessment we've confirms this. They train well. They respond well. They are, by any objective measure, a formidable military force. What they're not, and this is the thing I now understand that I didn't understand before, is good at being bored. No army is, really. But hegemony command structure punishes visible non-compliance and invisibly tolerates behavioral drift. Soldiers who look busy are not monitored. Soldiers who follow the outline of a patrol route are not questioned, even if they skip sections. Installations that file correct reports are not inspected, even if the reports are copied from last cycle's entries. The appearance of order becomes the substitute for order. Yara Voss found this in 6 days of watching. She found, for what it's worth, the patrol that cut the Eastern Ridge Loop. Every 3rd cycle, same 2 soldiers shaved 12 minutes off their route by skipping the methane vent cluster. Cold, sulfurous, unpleasant. She found the supply route where the driver always stopped at the same rock formation for approximately 8 minutes, and the manifest never mentioned it. She found the installation where a night cycle watch officer had, apparently for months, been spending his shift asleep. She didn't attack any of these. She noted them, and then she started moving. The hegemony lost 3 soldiers before anyone noticed they were gone. Not killed in engagement, not taken in a raid, TBH, gone. As in, present at last check, absent at next, no body, no sign of struggle, no indication of what had happened. I've the hegemony incident reports now, obtained via means my supervisor has asked me not to document. The reports describe the command response in dry operational language, but if you read between the compressed syntax, what you're actually reading is panic. 3 soldiers. Gone. No enemy contact logged, no perimeter breach detected. They locked down, pulled patrols in, tightened the watch rotations, did all the correct things. This, I now understand, is exactly what she wanted. Because the lockdown created a new pattern, a new predictability. Soldiers under heightened alert are more regimented, not less. They check in on schedule. They move on fixed routes. They concentrate at specific points. They become, paradoxically, easier to map. She spent basically 4 more days remapping them. She was on day 10 when she found the thing that changed everything. I don't fully understand how she found it. She described the process in the debrief with the calm of someone explaining a grocery run, and I was 2 pages into my notes before I realized. She was describing how she had identified the location of Veth Kalos's personal command post, a position our entire intelligence division had spent 4 months trying to pinpoint. She pretty much found it because of garbage and garbage. Veth Kalos was particular about his eating habits, officer-grade ration supplements. The packaging was distinct, a specific polymer shell our logistics analysts had cataloged, never used as a tracking indicator because I must tell you that it genuinely didn't occur to us. She found the disposal site. She backtracked the disposal frequency to establish a radius. She narrowed the radius by cross-referencing the patrol blackout zones, the gaps the nervous tightened, patrols left unintentionally in their new routes. He was in the gap of, well, course he was in the gap. He'd designed the patrol patterns. He knew where the holes were. He thought they were his. Timestamp. Cycle 441.8.141247. She paused here in the debrief. Not for effect. She was looking at something on the wall that wasn't there, the way soldiers look when they're pulling a memory up from a place they've built a door around. I've seen it before. I've over the years learned not to ask what's behind the door. I waited. She, to be fair, said, "He had a photograph too." I wrote it down. I didn't ask what was in it. She sort of said, "I didn't like that." Then she picked up her water container and drank the rest of it. And I turned the page in my notes, and we moved on. The debrief record has a 40-second gap at timestamp 1247. I left it in. She went in on day 11, 11 rounds in the sidearm. She came out with 10 and 1 round, like 1 shot, 1 use, and Veth Kalos had held command of the Eastern Advance for 3 years. His like forces had taken 4 systems. He had, in my opinion, been, by every available metric, the most effective military mind deployed in this theater. She was in and out in 8 minutes. She took the skull because, and I want to be precise here, because I asked her this directly, twice, in the debrief. She said proof of death needed to be unambiguous, and she'd seen enough intelligence fiascos to know that a verbal report wouldn't end the advance. It would just delay it. Someone would assume a hoax, and someone would need confirmation. Weeks would pass. The advance would regroup under a new commander before our side processed the intelligence. "The skull ends the argument before it starts," she said. She said it the same way I'd say the timestamp closes the record. I thought about that for a long time. The hegemony's eastern advance collapsed in 6 days, not because TBH of any tactical action on our part, because Veth Kalos's command network had been built around him, his relationships, his instincts, and his 40 years of operational pattern reading. It wasn't an institution. It was a personality. You remove the personality, the institution finds out it was never really there. To be fair, 6 days. Then the retreat signals started. Then the corridor was ours. She was asleep in the medical bay while it happened. She slept through the debrief request, the field commendation notification, and the emergency strategy meeting in which 3 senior officers argued for 40 minutes about what to do with a human who had accomplished in 31 days what 4 months of coordinated fleet intelligence had failed to produce. I watched, in my opinion, that meeting from the back of the room, my notes in hand, timestamps running. Nobody agreed on what to call her. I didn't offer a suggestion. That's not my role. But at TBH 1603, when the meeting adjourned without a resolution, I wrote something in the margin of my log. I drew a small box around it, the way I do when something matters. It said, she worked the environment. Actually, the environment was us. Plus, the transfer request is sitting in my outbox. I've been staring at it for about, let me check, 93 minutes, which is longer than the debrief took. Longer than the emergency strategy meeting, and longer than the argument I'd with my supervisor, senior analyst Feth Vol, who said the transfer was a waste of a specialized intelligence officer, and I said with respect, sir, I think my perspective on human integration operations has become compromised. And he said compromised how? And I said, I'm not sure that's a conversation I can have until I've slept, and then I didn't sleep, and came back to stare at the transfer request. The coffee is cold again. I'm going to drink it anyway. The part of the debrief I haven't logged yet. The part I've been organizing around, been adding timestamps before. After like it's a thing I can contain with good bureaucratic structure, is the conversation we had after the formal record closed. I turned off the official logging equipment. This is against protocol. I note that for the record, even, though this is my personal log and the record in question is not official. I TBH timestamp my own violations, and it's a whole thing. She was putting her jacket back on the one with the cut on the left sleeve that someone had restitched with what appeared to be hegemony-grade polymer thread. She'd found it somewhere, hadn't replaced it, just fixed it with whatever was available and kept going. I said, "Can I ask you something that's isn't in the report?" She looked at me for a moment. She has a way of looking at people, at me, that I've noticed other human soldiers don't do. TBH, direct, patient. Like she's deciding not whether to answer, but how much of the answer to give. She said, "One question." I said, "How did you know you were coming back?" She didn't answer right away. She picked up the photograph of the dog from the table. I'd brought her effects from the box because it seemed right, though I know this also isn't strictly protocol. And she looked at it. She said, "I didn't." I said, "Then what made you keep going after day 1? I mean day 6? When the mission changed from survival to—" I didn't have a word for what it had become. To that. She tucked the photograph into her jacket. She said, "I stopped working on the question of coming back. Around day 3. It was taking up too much processing. So I set it down. I wrote that in my personal log. Set it down, like it was a pack that had gotten too heavy. Like grief or fear, or the weight of 30 kilometers of enemy territory was something you could place on a rock and collect on the way out. I still don't know if that's extraordinary or terrifying. Possibly both, which possibly the same thing. There's a protocol, when a death report is filed in error, for generating a corrective addendum. It's a short form. Name, unit, date of original report, date of confirmed survival. A box for notes. The form is designed to be simple because the situation is supposed to be rare, and rare situations don't need complex paperwork. I've been staring at the notes box for timestamp 4 days. The notes box on the corrective form is 40 words. Standard death report reversals have notes like incorrect field assessment or communications failure, or, in the 3 prior cases I found in our archives, sensor malfunction. I don't know what to write in Yara Voss's notes box, and I tried. Subject returned from enemy-controlled territory under own power after 31 days, having eliminated HGM Field Commander Veth Kalos and destabilized Eastern Advance Corridor operations. Honestly, that is technically accurate. It fits the form. It feels like writing a note that says the sun came up when what you mean is, I watched it come up from a place I thought I was going to die, and the light was a specific color I don't have words for. And I will not be the same person I was before I saw it. The skull is in containment storage now. This, was a significant interdepartmental argument, and I don't have the energy to detail it fully, but the short version is, Fleet Medical wanted it for documentation. Fleet Intelligence wanted it as evidentiary material for a war crimes inquiry that our legal division is refusing to open, and Fleet Command wanted it destroyed because it was making the officers uncomfortable. She requested that it be returned to the hegemony as a formal notification of death. Fleet Command refused. She accepted the refusal without visible reaction, which I wrote. She is not surprised that institutions protect themselves. Then I drew the small box around it, the way I do when something matters. Timestamp, Cycle 4, 41.8.15, 0509. I had a conversation with Lieutenant Commander Arev Sol this morning that I've been trying to figure out how to log. Arev Sol runs, actually. The Human Integration Unit, the division that nominally manages coordination between our fleet assets and the human soldiers assigned to us. He's been in the role for 3 years. I guess he's very organized. He has a system for filing things that I find excessive even by my standards, and my standards involve time-stamping personal epiphanies. He called me in to discuss Yara Voss's field commendation, which had become politically complicated because formally commending her required acknowledging that she had spent 31 days in enemy territory after we had filed her death. Which, to be fair, required acknowledging that the death filing may have been premature, which required acknowledging that we had possibly sent a soldier into the Vithara corridor without adequate support, without adequate intelligence, and without a viable extraction protocol. And nobody wanted to acknowledge those things. Arev Sol wanted to know if I thought she would make noise about it. I said I thought she wouldn't. He asked why. I said, because she doesn't want the acknowledgement. She wants the corridor. He gave me the look my supervisor gives me when he means stop talking, Drakath. Then he said, that's a significant claim to make about a soldier's motivations. I said, I've read 1,100 pages of human integration behavioral assessments in the last 4 days. He said, that's not a qualification. I said, no. But she set down 30 kilometers of fear because it was taking up processing space, and if she could do that, then wanting a commendation was probably the first thing she set down. He was quiet for a moment. Then he, to be fair, said, file the commendation. I timestamped that. 0509. She was reassigned before the commendation processed. I found out through the transfer routing log, a habit, at 1143, cycle 441.8.16. New posting, Kethavar Reach, the northern approach. Where the hegemony's second expansion fleet has been staging for what our long-range projections describe, with what I've come to recognize as institutional optimism, as preliminary advance positioning. Preliminary advance positioning means they're coming. She's, going to meet them. I sat with that information for a while. Not long. I'm not built for long. I timestamp, I process, I file. But long enough, I finished the corrective addendum at 1417. Notes box, 40 words. I rewrote it 7 times and final text. Subject previously reported, KIA in Vathara Corridor, Cycle 4, 41.5.12. Status corrected following subject's return, Cycle 4, 41.8.14, original assessment error, intelligence failure at source. Recommend structural review of forward personnel protocols, clean, administrative, on the kind of language that goes in boxes without disturbing the boxes around it. I didn't write, she went in alone. Plus, she came back. She brought proof. She handed it to us like a receipt and went to sleep. I didn't write. I don't know what to do with the feeling eyed when I saw her at the gate. I didn't write. I don't know what to do with the question I asked her, or the answer she gave me, or the 40-second gap in the official debrief record at timestamp 1247. And these things go in the personal log, where I keep the things that aren't going to fit in boxes. Timestamp. Cycle 441.8.161503. I just found out the name of the dog. It's in the human liaison records. A routine welfare file, the kind they generate for long deployments, the kind nobody reads. She had listed emergency contacts, next of kin notifications, property arrangements, standard form. Item 7. Dependents and one dog. Name, Protocol. I looked at that for a while. Protocol. She named her dog Protocol, which I don't know why that broke something open. I don't have the analytic framework for it. I've been processing the skull and the corridor and the 40-second gap and the thing she set down on a rock somewhere in enemy territory. And the thing that gets me in the end is a dog named Protocol waiting in a facility somewhere, not knowing any of this happened, not knowing it's over, not knowing like she's coming back. The to be fair, AI transfer request is still in my outbox. I'm going to withdraw it. Not because anything has changed, because, well, I sat with it long enough to realize that what I'm actually afraid of isn't human soldiers, or what they're capable of, or what it does to you to be close to that kind of capability. I'm afraid of what happens when they don't come back. And since that fear isn't going anywhere, since the Cathavar reach projections don't suggest the kind of outcome that turns off that fear, I should probably be somewhere I can be useful. I've good timestamps. I notice garbage disposal patterns. I will keep, basically, the coffee cold for 40 minutes and then drink it anyway. It's a small thing. Most useful things are. Plus, log closed, cycle 441.8.161531, Sub-Officer Drekath 9, Intelligence Annex, FOB Tessavar, Addendum, 1532. I left the commendation on her bunk before she shipped out, with the dog photograph. She'd left it on the table in the debrief room. I didn't tell anyone. Timestamp 1532. Because it mattered.